Bowie State University, the University of Maryland, and the Second Lieutenant Richard W. Collins III Foundation welcome you to the BSU UMD Social Justice Alliance's Spring Symposium. Forward with hope. Never shall we forget.
Hello and welcome to the Spring 2021 Symposium for the Bowie State University, University of Maryland Social Justice Alliance. The theme for this year is Forward with Hope, Never Shall We Forget. I'm Aminta Bro, the president of Bowie State University, and I'm so pleased you could join us for this important discussion. I want to thank the University of Maryland and President Darryl Pines and the Lieutenant Richard Collins III Foundation and all of the panelists joining us here today. I'd also like to take a moment to congratulate President Pines on his inauguration happening this week. Congratulations, and on behalf of the Bowie State University campus community, we wish you and the entire University of Maryland campus a bright future ahead. We are thankful for your leadership, President Pines, and the positive impact you have already made through your leadership of the Social Justice Alliance. 4 years ago, we experienced the tragic loss of First Lieutenant Richard Collins III, a patriotic, bright, and beloved ROTC officer and student of Bowie State University. He was taken from us in a senseless act of violence. We are here today alongside the University of Maryland and those who are committed to combating racism and violence in our society as a testament to the human spirit and the hope we have for a better tomorrow. This alliance is part of the BSU larger commitment as a public university and as the first HBCU in Maryland to prepare students to contribute to the public good. As engaged citizens, to address the societal conditions and contributing to the welfare of their communities. Today we affirm that we are all part of one community. Coretta Scott King once said, "The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members." In the years following the loss of Lieutenant Collins, unfortunately, we have witnessed additional tragedies and growing concern for social injustice across our nation. However, we have also seen glimmers of hope when we don't let the story end there. For Bowie State University and the University of Maryland, we have hope and we are moving forward to action. We stand resilient with a fierce dedication to join with our fellow citizens and neighbors to help make our communities more just for us all. The forces that seek to divide us now witness that we will not be silent as tragedy strikes. And we take our vows to always move forward with hope and never forget the lessons history has taught us. As Maya Angelou once said, "Love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope." It is up to all of us, particularly those in higher education, to extol the virtues of an open and free democracy, one that is built on the tenets of inclusivity, freedom, and justice for all its citizens. As educators, we must prepare the coming generations of Americans to be civically minded and understand how the mistakes of our past can inform a brighter future for us all. As the oldest HBCU in Maryland, our campus community knows firsthand the power of education in the fight against social injustice. As we look back on our history, we are reminded that this fight cannot end with a swift victory, but rather with the continued and persistence and the use of our voices of people upholding the ideals of a society that refuses to tolerate intolerance. On behalf of Bowie State University and the Social Justice Alliance, I want to thank Dr. Cometta Hairston, Dr. Georgina Dodge, and all of the members of the Alliance for their leadership and efforts in concert with the Lieutenant Richard Collins III Foundation, Dawn Collins and Richard W. Collins Jr. Welcome to the Social Justice Symposium. I am pleased now to introduce my colleague, the president of the University of Maryland College Park, Dr. Darrell Pines.
Thank you, Dr. Bro. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's event. A special thank you to Cometta Hairston and Georgina Dodge, the leaders of the Social Justice Alliance, and the members of the Collins family here today. I'm Darrell Pines, and I've been part of the University of Maryland community for the past 26 years. Now serving in my first year as president of the University of Maryland, I am honored to be joining you today for an event that champions social justice, strengthens the relationships between two institutions in our state, and most importantly, honors the life and legacy of Lieutenant Richard W. Collins III. From the very first day of my presidency, I have made one of my top priorities the creation of a more inclusive and multicultural environment on our campus. My administration has worked to partner with many student leaders on critical issues, honor Maryland trailblazers, and pursue an anti-racist agenda. Today, you will hear from a fantastic panel of leaders working directly on social justice issues and advancing change. As you all know, the formation of the Social Justice Alliance by Bowie State University and the University of Maryland represents a historic partnership born out of the tragic murder of Lieutenant Collins, a young man with so much promise and integrity. Our collective work is in his honor. The Social Justice Alliance serves as an example of what can be achieved when a partnership is formed between an historically Black college and university and other important partners and collaborators. Together, we will break down barriers. We will affirm one another. At this moment, it is so important that we educate our students, faculty, staff, alumni about the history of racism and race relations in this country, so we can all thrive in a multicultural, multiracial society. Last spring, as our nation grappled with the unacceptable and unjust killings of more Black Americans, we convened a group of outstanding student leaders to discuss a number of critical issues and goals, including increasing the number of Black faculty and staff, strengthening spaces, organizations, programs that support a multicultural campus, implementing bias training, prioritizing minority enrollment, and certainly honoring the life and legacy of Lieutenant Richard Collins III. Through all of our critical work with the Social Justice Alliance in partnership with Bowie State University, and after close collaboration and meaningful conversations with the Collins family, we find ourselves at this moment. We are proud to announce that the location for a permanent memorial to honor Lieutenant Collins has been selected, and it is in close proximity to the bus stop where his life was taken. In addition, we have selected the first recipient of the Lieutenant Richard W. Collins III Memorial Scholarship to be awarded this spring. Forward with hope, never shall we forget. I recognize the significance of taking office at this place in history, as the nation and world is urgently seeking ways to dismantle anti-Black racism. And Black and Brown communities are disproportionately bearing the burden of COVID-19. And so I stay focused on leading with excellence. I admire this quote by Mahatma Gandhi. No man could be actively nonviolent and not rise against social injustice no matter where it occurred. We must plan for the post-COVID world we want to live in. One where we recognize our shared humanity, and one where we are motivated to tackle the most pressing issues of our time. I have great optimism for what we can achieve through the Social Justice Alliance. You know, Bishop Desmond Tutu once said, and I quote, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness." So in closing, thank you all for being the light that will help us see through the darkness. I look forward to continuing our partnership together.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the first annual Social Justice Alliance Symposium hosted in honor of our son, Lieutenant Richard Collins III. Our family comes from a long tradition of service to the country. My father was in the U.S. Army and fought in the Korean War. I served in the U.S. Navy, and our son joined Bowie State University's ROTC program because he felt called to serve his country as well.
I grew up the daughter of a proud New York City police officer. I too served alongside my husband as a Navy spouse. Witnessing our son taking that oath of office as second lieutenant was the proudest day of my life. It was Richard's dream to serve this country, and he hoped to one day be a general officer. And we were so proud of his decision to serve in the United States Army.
But as many of you know, just as quickly as our son's dream was being realized, his future was stolen from him. Richard was murdered on the University of Maryland campus just days after he was sworn into the U.S. Army by an individual who was known to be an alt-right member in a white supremacist social media group. In that instant, our story then became a part of a narrative that weave our family's history into America's history in a way we never imagined possible. In a country that we love, that we served faithfully, and that we believe was moving us toward progress. Our son's grandfather, my father, survived combat, but himself also couldn't survive the scourge of American racism. Some 62 years before, he was killed in a similar manner just after returning from the Korean War. He was murdered by a white man motivated by hatred for a stranger of a different color, and in a southern town that never cared to bring him to justice.
So, that's what brings us here today. Soon after Richard was murdered, Rick and I decided to channel the pain into purpose and to ensure that our son's legacy is still one of service to this great country.
It's why we started our foundation that invests in the work that helps move us toward a less hateful, more inclusive American society, and young leaders who we believe to be model citizens in our son's image.
It's why we also worked tirelessly to improve the law in the state of Maryland, the hate crime law, a law that we hope that can be modeled throughout the United States.
And it's why we're proud to partner with the University of Maryland and Bowie State University and all of you to continue our work.
So thank you. Again, thank you for taking the time to shine a light on what all needs to see and hear and to rid this wonderful country of the hate. So thank you again for committing to be a part of this great movement and solution and helping us to build a more perfect union.
If we each do our part, we can build the more perfect union that Richie pledged to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Thank you very much.
You're watching BSU TV.
I would say always be a voracious learner. You know, the resources at the school are innumerable, and make sure that you keep your body fit at all times. Good morning, friends, family, cadre, staff. Hannibal of Carthage is quoted as saying, "Aut viam invenum, aut faciam," find a way or make one. I feel as this quote described my college experience completely. I faced adversity throughout my time in the university, but I always seemed to find a way to overcome that adversity. 4 years ago, I came to Bowie State University. In that time, no other day besides this one has brought me such joy and happiness as today, the day that I get to be with all my friends, family, cadre on the day of my commissioning. I thank all of the faculty and staff here at Bowie State University for developing me into the man that I am, and most importantly, I thank the Lord my God for showing me providence in my life so far, and I hope He continues to do so. As I begin my military career, I'll keep each one of you that helped shape me in my heart and close to my mind. I'll never be a stranger. Thank you.
Hello and welcome everyone to the first event of the Social Justice Alliance by Bowie State University and the University of Maryland. Forward with Hope, Never Shall We Forget. My name is Taylor Palmer and I will be moderating today's panel. As we begin our live discussion about racism and social justice, we acknowledge the racial trauma that Black and Brown communities are experiencing in this moment, especially in light of the verdict of the Chauvin trial and other recent incidences of police brutality. UMD President Darrell Pines reminds us at this time, quote, "We remain focused on supporting our community as we grapple with social injustice in our country. We continue to honor the legacies of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Deontay Wright, and others who have lost their lives at the hands of law enforcement and continue to demand justice." And from President Aminta Rowe of Bowie State University, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. More work is ahead to achieve equity and justice, but today there is hope for a brighter future for our country, for all." We hope to continue conversations of transformation in our panel today. Shortly, we will hear from students and researchers dedicated to advancing the efforts of social justice. Before we begin, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of our panelists. I will start with a brief introduction to each speaker. First, we have Ms. Courtney Wells. Ms. Courtney Wells is a senior criminal justice major with a social justice concentration at Bowie State University. She is president of BSU's Student Government Association. Next, we have Zara Sadiq. Zara is a junior kinesiology major at the University of Maryland. She is president of the NAACP UMCP chapter. She is a member of the Bowie State University, University of Maryland Social Justice Alliance. Next, we have Mr. Daron Ezekson. Mr. Daron Ezekson is vice president of the Mid-Atlantic Midwest Division of the Anti-Defamation League. Mr. Ezekson and his teams work daily to combat anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. He is a frequent speaker and media commentator on the issues of anti-Semitism, hate crime, and extremism, and has testified before state legislators and the U.S. Rights Commission. Next, we have Ms. Taffany English. Ms. Taffany English is the director of the Southern Poverty Law Center's Civil Rights Memorial Center in Montgomery, Alabama. The CRMC is an interpretive center that provides visitors with a deeper understanding of the civil rights movement and includes the Civil Rights Memorial, which honors 40 men, women, and children killed during the movement. Ms. English served as the first director of Learning for Justice's Mix It Up program, which encourages school children to form friendships with children from other backgrounds. Next, we have Dr. Ray-Sean Ray. Dr. Ray is a professor of sociology and executive director of the Lab for Applied Social Science Research at the University of Maryland, College Park. Currently, he is a David M. Rubenstein Fellow at the Brookings Institution. Dr. Ray is also one of the co-editors of Context Magazine's Sociology for the Public. His research addresses the mechanisms that manufacture and maintain racial and social inequality with a particular focus on police-civilian relations and men's treatment of women. Lastly, we have Dr. Charles Adams. Dr. Adams is a criminologist and department chair of behavioral sciences and human services at Bowie State University. Dr. Adams has extensive research and national consulting experience on racial issues in the criminal justice system, such as programming to promote effective community policing and efforts to reform the ways the justice system manages people suffering with addiction. Notable partnerships and grant sources include the District of Columbia, Prince George's County Superior Court, and Tampa Police Department. Dr. Adams is also interim director and co-founder of Bowie State University's Institute for Restorative Justice and Practice. Thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to hearing more about your individual insights and lived experiences. We will begin with our first question directed to the entire panel. What can we learn from Black freedom movements as we are all grappling with contemporary white supremacist violence? I will first start with Courtney.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for being in attendance and having me here today. I believe that what we can learn from these Black freedom movements are the ideals of perseverance and also the need for individual society to hold white supremacist violence accountable as they do the movements of Black freedom movements. We often see that Black freedom movements receive hardly any news broadcasting unless there is a negative connotation besides those positive implications placed on social media by those people themselves. But there are hardly ever any times that, such as the day at the Capitol, where white supremacist groups are held accountable for their actions. And as related to the day at the Capitol, there was a simple depiction of the way that the nature of the society sees these white supremacist groups because of the lack of accountability. And I believe that we can, one, charge them with accountability, and then also take away from these Black freedom movements the prompt urge of awareness of the social justice things that are disproportionately affecting Black individuals.
Thank you. We will now move to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I think a few things that we can learn from previous Black freedom movements is that, one, I think that education is such a huge, a huge thing that we can all take from, and not education as in just higher education or just school, but also understanding the impacts of systemic racism in this country on top of the neoliberalism, and how even though many POC communities are marginalized, are oppressed, we also have to understand that white communities are benefiting from that marginalization, from that appropriation, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think educating ourselves on how the system is built and how it works in order to dismantle it. I also think we can learn the importance of international solidarity regarding Black freedom movements, like partnering with the Asian American community, partnering with Latinx communities and things of that nature in order to have a better support system and also a bigger stage to present, our grievances and our issues to get better rights, get better treatment, equality.
Thank you for that insight. Next, we will move to Duran.
Thank you, Taylor. And I'd like to begin first by just recognizing Dawn and Rick Collins again and thanking them and the institutions involved for this important conversation and my interactions with Don and Rick, they stand for the kind of resolve that can only, unfortunately, sometimes flow from tragedy. And I just know how much this means to them. And I appreciate being included here. I also want to note that I'm here as an ally, an upstander, a collaborator, a co-conspirator in confronting violent white supremacy. And I would suggest that it's not my place nor my background to suggest how we can learn from prior Black freedom movements, but rather that we look through the lens of white supremacy itself. And we try to identify its goals and the means by which it seeks to achieve the center of its violent ideology. And I think in recognizing and seeing what the violent white supremacy represents, what it has represented in history and continues to represent today, is a hatred of all people of color, a hatred of people of different faiths, a hatred, a misogyny, an anti-LGBT. They target Muslims, they target the Asian American community broadly, the Latino community, the Jewish community, the Sikh community. And in that targeting lie, I would argue, the answer to how we normalize what all of us aspire to, which is justice and equity in this country. And that is by realizing that we, the targets of white supremacy, the targets of the hate that underlies violent white supremacy, that we are the majority. And it is in our cooperation, collaboration, our taking cues and being educated by each other that we will turn back this latest chapter, this latest violent chapter of the type of violent white supremacy that has a historically and continuing far disproportionate impact on people of color in this country. And so I am here in that spirit and welcome the expertise of our fellow panelists.
Thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you more. Next, we will move on to Taffany.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you to Bowie State University of Maryland, the Social Justice Alliance, for having us here. I think in answering this question, I have to reflect back to the Civil Rights Memorial and the 40 men, women, and children that we honor at the memorial in Montgomery, because I think what we oftentimes forget is that without the people, that there would be no movement. And so as we reflect on what we can learn from Black freedom movements, let us not forget that we learn from the transformative power of everyday, ordinary individuals who organize, strategize, and use their voice for collective change. I also want to point out that every movement has its moments. And the Montgomery bus boycott, which served as a model, one of the first models for Black protest movements in other cities, it demonstrated the ability of Black communities to unite and struggle collectively for change. And also reflecting on the words of Ella Baker as I come to a close, oppressed people, whatever their level of education, have the ability to understand and interpret the world around them, to see the world for what it is and move to transform it. And one of the most important things that we can learn from the Black freedom movement is to not negate, diminish, or dismiss the voices of the people who have the lived experiences under Jim Crow and under white supremacy. The system under which we now exist has to be radically changed. People in the Black freedom movement realized it then, we know it now. And we also know that it very much can be and should be a multiracial and multi-ethnic movement where we are all fighting to make the ideals of justice and equality a reality for all people.
Thank you for your insights, Taffany. We will now move on to Dr. Ray.
So Taylor, it is great to be here with you. I just want to recognize all of the organizers, people who are part of the Social Justice Alliance. I consider it an honor to serve on that important committee and to also be a member of the Lieutenant Collins Foundation. To Mr. and Mrs. Collins, my heart just continues to go out to you for your courage, for your resiliency. And when I think of Collins family, it also at times can make sense that we're in this movement for Black lives that really represents resiliency, that represents effectiveness, that represents efficiency for a movement that literally started 9 years ago when Trayvon Martin was killed. And as we think about the legacy that is being built throughout history, people will continue to read the movement for Black lives. They will read about how intersectional it is, how inclusive it is, and most importantly, the way that it has strived for social change, whether that be in criminal justice reform, whether that be grappling with white supremacy more broadly, and in particular, having the ability to circumvent traditional modes of communication. The movement for Black lives did not wait for mainstream media to show up. They did not wait for politicians to get on board. Instead, they put the boots on the ground. They used social media and their mobile phones to highlight what was happening in local communities. And these are the sort of things that we need to continue to do. This is also a movement similar to past movements that is ran and operated by young people. That becomes extremely important because oftentimes young people see a world that those of us who are older have been tainted by society and socialized to not see. So as we think about what is happening in this movement for Black lives, there's a lot more work to do. But the work that has been done in such a short period of time is just extremely admirable, including the Lieutenant Collins hate crime law, which we heard Mr. and Mrs. Collins talk about, which is the most transformative piece of hate crime legislation that we have in the country. Other states need to follow suit, and at the federal level, it also needs to follow suit as well.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. We really look forward to hearing from you more as we go on with the panel. Lastly, we have Dr. Adams.
Thank you, Taylor. On behalf of my fellow colleagues, staff, and students at Bowie State University, it is truly an honor to be here today for this very important occasion. Second Lieutenant Richard Collins, by all definitions, was a patriot. As Rick and Don Collins stated, he fought for a more perfect union. What we can learn from the Black Civil Rights Movement is that every participant in that movement were patriots because they fought to uphold the values, the spirit of that statement, all men are created equal. The movement sought to bring us together as one. The movement sought to uphold those lofty values that's written in the Constitution. The movement sought to be inclusive of other people's values, morals, and standards. It was not to be separate. It was not to be discriminatory. It was simply to make this a better place, a better society for all. It wanted not the small a of all, but understood the large A of all. Same as not the small we, but the big we. The civil rights movements included all of my brothers from all across the ethnic range, from the Native Americans to the Asians, to the Hispanics, to our Jewish colleagues. Everyone fought in the movement. Everyone stood shoulder by shoulder, trying to make this a more perfect union. We cannot lose sight that the battle is not over. We have a long way to go. And at times, as Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's when we call to action. That's when we galvanize ourselves. That's when we look straight at the enemy and say, we're here for the long haul. I am so proud to be associated with the Richard Collins, Second Lieutenant Richard Collins Foundation and the Bowie State University, University of Maryland Social Justice Alliance, because I too, as Richard Collins, is a patriot. And we look forward to changing the society and moving just a little bit more closer to a more perfect union. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adams, and all of our panelists for your reflective responses. Our next question is directed to our student leaders on the call today. What type of support do you all need as you are engaging activism while also trying to graduate and advance your careers?
I believe, I apologize. I believe that personally, the most important support that we need is mental. There have been generations who fought these battles that we are currently fighting. However, our generation era is a little different, and I don't believe that we hesitate to support one another and collectively gather when needed. However, we have a lack of consistency. And I believe the reason we have a lack of consistency is because we're under the grasp of social media. And we see these things such as police shootings and acts of brutality, homelessness, missing children, just on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram. And it is great that we're always informed and always aware of the things going on. But we hardly have a time to release. And personally speaking, I'm a criminal justice major, and it's often difficult to detach your emotions from the things that you are learning in class because you could see yourself as that person or the family member of that person. But also having to learn it daily within our courses and applying it to how we want to change these things, it can mentally be draining. But I believe that that is why there's an essential need for us as in our generation to take a time to detach from our phones as well in social media and ground ourselves to the things that we are passionate about. Take walks, go on hikes, keeping your faith and peace of mind, because you don't want to make all of your passions hard work where they don't become passions and they become things that mentally drain you. But you want to have an outlet, you want to be passionate about these things. But I believe our generation, we have a difficult time having that outlet, especially in this time of COVID, because we're subjected to our houses, we're subjected to our neighborhoods that may not be seen as an outlet, because for many individuals within the Black community, college is going away from your environment is an outlet. And the fact that we are not stuck in these environments, but it's COVID, we're in a pandemic, so we are being precautious and we're being safe, but it's like we still need an outlet mentally for the things that are surrounding us, especially, as I said, like students who are doing the work, watching the work, and wanting to change the work. Is just something that we have to take a moment, detach from ourselves, and then just ground ourselves in our purpose and know that we can keep pushing, but we have to stay grounded, because the things on social media are just, I'm not going to say that they're all negative and they're detrimental, but I know that oftentimes people will try to honestly do a timeline refresh and just post a positive for 5 minutes because of all of the things going on. And things like that, they seem so small and minuscule, but when you see it, it's like, oh, wow, I haven't seen something like this in a while. And it's just refreshing of those times. So just grounding ourselves in the support of mental, because people in past generations, as I said, have gone through these things and persevered through these things. And we look to them for guidance and as inspiration for former and still current Black freedom movement. So we just need support mentally and just a grounding of ourselves.
Thank you, Courtney, for being able to offer perspectives. I'm sure both universities are listening to this, and I hope moving forward that they will be able to offer you both the resources and students moving forward. Next, we will move to Zara.
Hi, yes. First of all, Courtney, that was an amazing response. I completely agree in totality of what you were saying. Like, given the times that we're living in, one, we're in a pandemic, two, on the racial tensions and just the atmosphere. 2020 was one different year, first with COVID, and then amongst with the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, sadly, among other people. It's just been very stressful and very difficult living these times on top of being a student and then on top of being a student leader. So there are so many stressors and so many things to think about in our daily life. So I do think taking like mental health as a priority for students should be on like the forefront, because not only looking into myself, but also talking to students of the like, my friends, my classmates, people who are in different orgs. One common theme that I have noticed is that people are, one, just mentally exhausted, especially student leaders, just trying to plan events, trying to speak up on certain issues, because these are important, because these affect our daily lives, especially being a person of color, especially being Black. So that's one thing. And also a lot of people, due to social media, due to the news, are feeling very desensitized about, these acts of violence. A lot of people just see Black people of color being killed on police brutality on TV and just feel hopeless and feel lost because sadly it's such a high occurrence. So I feel like prioritizing that mental health and also prioritizing showing support will greatly help student communities. I think another thing that administrations can do is show up for like student leaders and student leader events, student leader hosted events. I feel like one of the best ways they can do that is trying and to not have such a big disconnect between the student community and administration, trying to create some type of close relationship with those two aspects of the university. This way to clear up communication and to also show like, hey, I'm here for you. Hey, I'm here for you as a resource, things like that. Because being a student leader, planning these events, trying to get the community together to protest, to support, to show up, it's very taxing on the students on top of going to classes and getting our degrees. So getting that support from administration would feel very reassuring to not just myself as a student leader, but I'm sure all the students watching and participating.
Thank you both for reflecting on your experiences as student leaders in the community. We certainly hope, moving forward that faculty and staff are able to hear your messages here and are able to continue to uplift student voices. Next, we will move on to our faculty. So our next question asks, universities across the United States have started offering space for conversation and task force about their involvement with slavery. How do we ensure that these efforts address white supremacy and lead to action? I will start first with Dr. Adams.
Thank you, Taylor. We must be very intentional about breaking down and understanding systemic racism and structural inequality, not only at the higher levels, but within our individual space. And I'll give you an example of what we at Bowie State University is currently doing. We just finished a textbook, my colleagues and I, edited by Dr. Harrison, Dr. Edmonds, on the Black experience. And part of that discussion dealt with the issue of systemic racism, not in contemporary times, but looking at over time and understanding the impact that it has on our everyday lives. And one part of that is the issue of diversity on college campuses is, especially PWIs, historically white institutions, they want diversity, but they force assimilation. And what we're trying to educate our students on is that is just as damaging and part of systemic discrimination is the devaluing of our culture. It's creating a standard that's not like that's not ours and saying strive to this standard. And so universities, college professors have to have a racial consciousness to understand that yes, there's a difference, but please do not attach value to that difference. Appreciate that difference, appreciate the cultural differences of the African American community, of the Latino community. But by constantly measuring the American standards, when in fact you do not consider me American, is problematic. Understand that the African American standard, the HBCU standard, has tremendous value. It's no better or worse than the American standard. We're just asking that you recognize in your space that you acknowledge the value of our culture and you acknowledge the value of what we can bring to that conversation, to the greater culture. And that is important for us. That is important for social justice. That is important for healing. That is important to understand the greater picture. White supremacy wants to say you're not part of the American standard, not part of the American value system. You have to push back. And the way we push back is to acknowledge everyone's culture, to acknowledge that culture, yes, though it is different, it's not less than. And that is how we at the grassroots level can push back on white supremacy. And that's at the grassroots level that college and university can truly not train, not graduate students, but educate and graduate students for this fight of social justice. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Adams, for your insights and how we can continue this moving forward with students. Now we will move to you, Dr. Ray.
Well, look, first, I completely agree with Dr. Adams. What we have to do is to become honest with ourselves about the role that white supremacy has played in universities being where they are, particularly when it comes to predominantly white institutions, but especially as it relates to land grant institutions and why we even needed historically Black colleges and universities to begin with. I mean, in my department, in the Department of Sociology, the late Congressman Perrin Mitchell was the first African-American to take courses at the University of Maryland, graduate courses on campus, and receive his degree. That was in 1952. That was not that long ago. So as we think about this legacy, part of what we have to do is go through a truth, reconciliation, restorative, and reparative process. Part of what that means is not only interrogating our curriculum to decolonize it. This is the things that we're doing at the University of Maryland in the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences, also in the College of Arts and Humanities and across campus, to engage in a series of anti-Blackism initiatives to decolonize the syllabi, to look at better ways that we can hire. We know that President Pines has made one of the largest investments nationally in aiming to address the pipeline, particularly when it comes to Black faculty, but also Black graduate students, Black undergraduates, and even staff. And part of thinking about this, if the state of Maryland really wants to get it right, and some of this has happened to atone for what's happened to historically Black colleges and universities in the state, because we know that HBCUs oftentimes have programs taken, they have funding taken from them. And that's a travesty not only to the students who go there and the people who work there, but also to the entire state and our nation, to deprive people of their ability to be upwardly mobile. So part of going through this truth and reconciliation process is looking at the things that I described, but then it comes to the reparative and restorative process. In the state of Virginia, that has asked its universities to look at the role that slavery played in creating them, and then thinking of ways to atone for that process. That's the same thing we should be doing in the state of Maryland. And I think conversations like this, to bring together a PWI and an HBCU that both sit in Prince George's County, where a lot of Black people live in the middle of that, not just an affluent middle-class population that we know that have come up, but on these same lands, people were picking cotton who are our ancestors and who were enslaved in these lands in Prince George's County. And we still haven't properly atoned for that. State Delegate Wanika Fisher, who is a graduate of University of Maryland, has been pushing the Harriet Tubman Community Investment Act. And I think these are the sort of things that it really looks like that universities should get behind if we're truly to move toward an equitable society.
Thank you, Dr. Ray, for your insights. And just to go back to a point made by our student leaders, to ask you both here as faculty members, how can faculty continue to support students and uplift their voices as we're hearing, in their actions that they're taking outside of the classroom?
Well, I mean, I think it's a couple of things. I think first, as I mentioned, it's about decolonizing the syllabus. I think the second thing is about bringing diverse perspectives into class. And I think the third thing is really critical, is oftentimes when we get older, we always like to say, oh, I've been there, I've done that. I've been in college, I've lived through this. Well, you know what? We haven't lived through what we're living through right now. And we need to respect that people who are in college right now, like these undergraduates like yourself, who are doing amazing work, are experiencing something that we've never dealt with before. If we just look at police killings, for example, police killings have increased nearly 100% over the past few decades. You all have grown up with that, not us. And so oftentimes what we need to do is not only use our skill set to teach and guide, but first we need to listen, have empathy, and then think of the best strategies to move forward to prepare you all for the life that you're going to have after you leave college.
I completely agree with Dr. Ray. Couldn't say it better, Dr. Ray. We have an obligation to educate. There's a popular line that goes, use the old people wisdom and the young people's energy. but we need to pass it. We need to pass it down and work collectively and understand that the way to defeat and the way to keep forward is at the grassroots. We start within our classrooms, within our communities, and we advocate very strongly social justice. We advocate very strongly of going into the communities and taking and giving back and partnering with those individuals that want to walk with us towards a more perfect union. And so thank you, Taylor, for that opportunity to do a follow-up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Ray, and thank you, Dr. Adams, for your responses there, where we can see how faculty are able to really partner with our student leaders and how they're able to uplift voices and continue this march for social justice. Our next question is directed to our social justice professionals. What connections do you see between the rise in anti-Asian violence and anti-Black violence? What are ways that we can build solidarity? We will start with you, Duran.
Thank you. There is a direct connection, and it is rooted in my comments earlier about the ideology of white supremacy. But I also want to take a moment to commend Zara's call for accountability for the insurrection and the acts that occur every day, and the recognition as well of the role of social media and the fact that there is repeat trauma that is associated with the hate that is online. That the very thing that connects us enables this generation faces a new type of hate, a new platform that magnifies and elevates it, where the hate doesn't need to find you as an individual, it simply is broadcasted across channels which we've come to depend on, and all the more acutely in the response to the coronavirus. And by the way, much of the anti-Asian hate is rooted in conspiracy theories related to the coronavirus, amplified by our former leader, and continuing in spaces to be part of conspiracy theories that suggest that which is that we must be afraid of as Americans has its roots in the action or the impurity or the uncleanliness or the hostility of others. Those others are other Americans, however. And so we need to see the interconnectedness. We need to understand that our Asian American community has seen, according to our statistics and our monitoring of online hate, the largest spike in online harassment this year of any community. And that is not to understate the constant refrain and assault for people of color and other minorities. But I think we have two challenges here as we begin to unpack that. And one is to understand what so many of you have spoken so eloquently about, which is the battle to undo and to recreate our institutions. And the other more immediate, I would say, and not to suggest that there isn't urgency to that, but the immediate need to also respond to the incidents which drive the trauma, the tragedy on a daily basis, and to understand how we can fight back, how we can hold those in the insurrection accountable and not hold them to a double standard that was reflected, I think, fairly in the police response or in the unfair police response. That we have to understand the interconnection and join together to monitor, to analyze. We at ADL speak in terms of investigate, advocate, and educate. And the investigation is acute, and we are more concerned than we have ever been about the role of violent white supremacy in our society. I want to say this unequivocally, that there is a moment that we have come to, an anti-democratic authoritarian moment that is continuing, notwithstanding a change of power structure. It is extremely violent, and it seeks to do harm out of a sense of the replacement theory, out of its fealty to the so-called replacement theory, where it can justify violent murder of women, of our Muslim colleagues, of the Sikh community, the Asian community, the Jewish community, the LGBTQ community, certainly the African American community, the Latino community, and on, out of this sense of self-preservation. We need to address that with urgency, even as we continue the critical work at unpacking the very long and institutionalized problems of institutionalized racism.
Thank you for your response. Taffany, we will move on to you next.
Yeah, no, I just want to just say that Dorian, really covered it really well, what the connection is that we see between the rise in anti-Asian violence and anti-Black violence. And I just want to stress that again, that we cannot underscore or ignore the role of white nationalism and white supremacy, because it is the strongest predictor. And it has been largely perpetrated and perpetuated by the administration administration, and the effects of white nationalism on both Black Americans and Asians. They both have experienced high levels of racial discrimination since the pandemic began. But I do want to speak a little bit more because, as I said, Dorian, covered it very well. I do want to speak to the need for what we can do as it relates to building stronger solidarity. And I want to point out again, and this has been said over and over in the panel, what has history taught us, right? And we know that history has demonstrated a long history of Black and Asian solidarity, dating back to the internment camps, and the solidarity continued after that war. And Japanese Americans were very active in opposing segregation. They supported equal rights for Black folks. I think what we're struggling with today, and we have to fight really hard to push back against these narratives that are divisive, and they really obscure the long history of Black and Asian solidarity within communities. And so I think while there's this notion, and of course it's something that the white supremacists are doing as well, is that they are adding and pitting us against one another while this violence rises against Asian Americans and remains targeted against Black Americans, that solidarity and mutual support are as important as ever. But that does go back to that education piece, right? What are we teaching about the history of Asian Americans and Black Americans and their relationships with one another? What are we teaching about the history of Asian Americans? And we know, again, that Asian Americans face some of the same socioeconomic and institutional barriers that impede Black and Latinx people, as well as it relates to education. And anti-Blackness devalues Blackness while systematically marginalizing Black people, right? And that's the same thing that we're seeing over and over again. And I also have to just reflect back on, working with the Collins family, and at the core, providing education in communities across the board is important and critical to the work that they're doing with the foundation, the work that's happening with the Social Justice Alliance. And also my colleagues in Learning for Justice are constantly reminding people that as hard as history may be, we must teach it with transparency and truth.
Thank you, Duran and Taffany, both for your insights and really being able to provide these calls to action to communities near and wide. Going off of that, talking in terms of the week that we're coming off of, I'm sure many around the world are wondering, how can communities become involved in combating police brutality?
Taffany, you want to begin?
Okay, sure. I'll say, I think where we are in this country, again, I can't remember if it was Dr. Ray or Dr. Adams who pointed out, we know that police brutality existed, in modern civil rights movement. We know law enforcement was used to incite racial violence in communities. I don't know if many of you saw The People versus the Klan, which chronicles Mrs. Donald, who had to really fight the Klan here in Alabama, who had murdered her son. And that very much was a community effort. And so when we think about kind of what we're doing with the call, where there are some calling for reform, there are some calling for defunding of the police, but overwhelmingly what I do know is that we have to have some accountability. And I think after the verdict of George Floyd, we heard a lot of people who say, oh, justice was finally served. I have a different view. right? That is one instance of justice, but we have so much work to do. And that was the first phase in accountability. But what happens after that? We know Maryland has a new model for policing, right? And the nation applauded that move, but where do we go from there? And I think that is a collective action between civil rights organizations and the community. And as we're looking at policy, we're looking at litigation, all of those, and advocacy. I think Dorian mentioned advocacy. We have to do all of those things together. We can't operate in silos as it relates to that. So there's a long journey ahead of us, but it is one that I am now more hopeful today than I was last week. I actually did an interview last week and someone asked the question, kind of what are your hopes for the verdict? And I had to be very honest and transparent because I had no expectation because history had taught me something really different, right? And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dorian.
Thank you. And I'll just repeat, I was thinking exact same term, accountability. Accountability is all, and accountability is not a moment. It is not a verdict. It is not a particular action against a particular officer or department. Accountability is a system. It's something that's integrated into the operation, into the education, the training, into the ethos of an institution, which we hope will evolve to its rightful place as a protector of all. It is in some places. There are officers who are struggling to do the right thing. There are leaders who are emerging, and we need to lift up those leaders within law enforcement, by the way, who are willing to try to institutionalize accountability in the frame that we are discussing. But this will not end in a day. It will not end in a year. This is for the generations to now take this moment, take the tragedy, take the incredible pain of the last year and or the last 2 years or the last 10 or 20, and whatever your time frame is. The reality is it's continuous. To state unequivocally that Black Lives Matter, that our institution must be accountable, and to make that happen. And we do that again in coalition, in coordination, in partnership towards a better country for us all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that call to action for us all to stand united, because we are not strong without one another. Lastly, we switch to our question directed to the entire panel. Today, we continue to see unhelpful and toxic comparisons about the quality of education available at HBCUs and predominantly white universities that reinforce harmful racial stereotypes in American society. How can the Bowie State University of Maryland Social Justice Alliance help address this long-standing vestige of institutional racism? I will start with you first, Jerome.
Well, thank you. And I'm clearly the least qualified to answer this question, so you're getting me out of the way quickly. I like that. That's smart. But let me just say, and I'm looking forward to being further educated by my colleagues here. I don't understand the persistence of this theme. It is distressing. It is unjustified. It is another example of the white supremacy that we have been discussing. But for me, Booker T. Washington, Martin Luther King, Vice President Harris, Toni Morrison, you name, that speaks to the quality of the system and the potential of the system. And Richard Collins does, most notably as well. So we must educate, elevate, work, continue in collaboration as the institutions are here to have yet another conversation. Because what we are trying to fight back against here is pervasive. It infects every aspect, every corner of our society. And so there should be no institution about which we don't have a discussion. We don't have a rethink. We don't look again to an evolved, better future. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to you, Taffy.
So I think the creation of the Social Justice Alliance was a step in the right direction. I love that. I love the concept of the partnership. Conversations are important. but I also feel strongly that we have to really be thinking about moving forward beyond conversations. We have to bring it back to the community, right? Because HBCUs and PWIs are very instrumental to the communities in which they exist. That's University of Maryland, that's UMD, and that's Bowie State. But oftentimes what we see is that the worlds of the PWI and the HBCU student are very different, even in close proximity to each other. And that is the access to resources. But as I think about the Social Justice Alliance and its members who are part of the greater community, what I feel is just really important is that the voices of the community not be left out from the alliance, right? Those lived experiences are going to be really important. And I'm like Dorian, right? I'm on an island. And so I think the question, again, will be best served by students and faculty who are there, but just thinking in a broad perspective and also thinking about Lieutenant Richard Collins and his family, and they're pillars of the community. And he was a student at Bowie State, and he lost his life on the campus of UMD, right? And so I think, thinking about all of that and putting it in context will be very instrumental in moving the Social Justice Alliance forward and the work on the HBCU and PWI campus.
Thank you, Taffany, for that call to involve all of our communities. Dr. Ray?
Well, look, I'll just echo what we've heard. It's very clear that the work we're doing with the Social Justice Alliance is unprecedented. It's important. And I think it can become a model. But of course, there's so much more we can do. And oftentimes, the more that can be done comes along with resources. There are plans, and that's already in motion, to have a social justice center to continue to acknowledge the legacy of Lieutenant Collins at the University of Maryland. And oftentimes these can be symbolic, but the real work comes from being able to get students on different campuses together. Even in the same county, oftentimes students are in quite different worlds in different parts of the county. And I think we can work harder to have students come across from different phases. Now, we know that some of this happens with summer programs, whether that be the Summer Research Initiative in the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences in Maryland, or even the McNair Scholars Program. But on a regular basis throughout the academic year, we need to be getting students together. We need to be bringing faculty together like this is happening. And I think the Social Justice Alliance is going to lead that this is just one of the pinnacle events. It's going to be a series of programmatic activities. And then, of course, beyond the programmatic activities and the resources that scale up the type of work we do, then also comes relationships and bonds. And for those of us who have been to college, we know that the bonds you form in college can oftentimes last a lifetime. And I think that it's for students at the University of Maryland and Bowie State to be able to form bonds with each other beyond the bonds they already had before they got to campus, or the bonds that come from being part of Greek organizations or other organizations, but bonds that authentically come from simply being on a college campus that happens to be in the same county that shares a tragedy that we want to remember, and also be able to build upon, to ensure that not only this doesn't happen again, but to also ensure that we put in place the type of programs, the type of events, and the legacy that can truly live up to what Lieutenant Collins would have wanted us to do.
Thank you, Dr. Ray, for that. And I thank all of our panelists for all of your actions to really help bridge that relationship between the two universities. Dr. Adams, we will now transition to you.
Oh, thank you, Taylor. Basically, I will echo the comments of my colleagues. Just being at the table and having the relationship between the two campuses, along with the students, and having the students walk the campus when we get back to campus in the fall, and having that interaction and seeing each person, each student, each campus as equal, and understanding that this is a fight that we're in together. And so I love the fact that Bowie State, historically a Black college and university, has partnered with UMD, a historically white college and university, to move forward on social justice and acknowledge that we have a long way to go but we can go together. And that's the message that we're sending to the local community and to the larger community, that we're going to fight this together. That out of this unfortunate, horrible tragedy, we had the power and the courage of the Collins family to say, we're not going to just go away, that we are going to address this, we're going to attack this, and we are going to bring the parties together, and we're going to educate the next generation that to understand that this is we have to do together. And so I applaud the Collins family. I applaud my colleagues at Bowie State University, and I applaud my colleagues at University of Maryland, and big ups to the students, because they're truly the walkers and the motivators that's going to take us across the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adams, and that transitions us very nicely to our student representatives here on the call. Zara, would you like to comment on the question?
Sure. I feel like everybody just said all the best I was thinking. But regarding the toxic comparisons between HBCUs and PWIs, I feel like a lot of those comparisons from ignorant and also explicit and implicit biases and stereotypes that simply aren't true. If you look up statistics and just surveys, a lot of students that come out of HBCUs feel more financially stable. They feel more prepared for life compared to some students at PWI. So I feel like these stereotypes and other implications of HBCUs just stem from ignorance and other stereotypes that have existed for a very long time. So I feel like in order to combat those stigmas, I feel like the University of Maryland, they're trying to combat those with the Social Justice Alliance that we're participating in today. I feel like acknowledging, the difference that a lot of people think, or not even a lot of people think, just the differences that exist now, and educating those for the future can really help battle those stereotypes, especially with the Second Lieutenant Richard Collins Foundation. I feel like educating those in the future students coming into both of our universities, making sure they know what happened, instead of just like forgetting in the future. I feel like it shouldn't just be known by the students who went to the university around that time. I feel like it should be taught and it should be known by other students who attend our universities. I feel like the Second Lieutenant Richard Collins III Foundation and the SGA, BSU UMD Alliance, is doing a great job in trying to make sure that happens. And I also had another point. I'm sorry. I wanted to thank the Collins family and also my colleagues on the panel for their great points, their views, and for also the hard work that we're all partaking in, because we have a long way to go, but I do feel like we're taking the right steps in order to get that things that we're all striving for. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Zara. And next we will move to Courtney.
Hello, everyone. Again, I would like to start my remarks by thanking as well everyone on the panel, just for your insight, just for your, again, hard work. Special shout out to my department chair, Dr. Adams, for our amazing restorative justice initiative that we started this year. It was an amazing program, and our first one. So I know upon next year and the following years, it will continue to be amazing. And also the Social Justice Alliance, where we are all a part of currently, that grow as we put our voices into it and use our power effectively. The first step that I believe to breaking these barriers of just toxic standards is having these conversations such as these to understand perspectives of students who may be attending different universities and having different daily life experience, but these students specifically ultimately identify as the same in society, and we face the same obstacles in society. So I think it is essential that we understand the history of our institutions to understand how we've gotten here, but understand the place we have in the world to advocate for these changes to occur. I think it is essential for all of these individuals at historically Black colleges, at PWIs, to advocate for these changes, specifically because we are the ones who are affected by them, or individuals who are close to people who may be affected by these things, regardless of the institution, to use their voice to advocate for other schools and support each other. And I've seen this within my work within the USM Council. We at the historically Black colleges, we push, and thankfully it worked, and it came, and we have successfully our goal. But advocating for the HBCU bill, and that was one thing that I was very adamant about this year, and I did receive support from my other USM institutions within the University Council. But outside of that, it seems to be only historically Black colleges like supporting each other within that fight. And I think it is essential for all of us to support each other's obstacles at our respective universities and institutions, so that we see ourselves in society as the same, because we are the same, and support each other regardless of where we are.
Thank you, Courtney, for that call to essentially hold a mirror, for our universities to hold a mirror to society. As you and Dr. Adams have alluded to, talking about the Bowie State University's Institute for Restorative Justice and Practice, I was just wondering if you guys could go provide some more insight for us about that.
Well, I will be glad to, Taylor. We launched the Institute this year, and we had our first conference on April the 9th. And we are looking to really make an impact in the local, state, and national and international communities, because we recognize trauma. We recognize that we need to heal. We need the mechanism to address the hurt that has been caused by systemic racism, the hurt that has been caused by inequality, the police brutality. How do we address the trauma that occurs in Black and brown communities? How do we address the trauma that has occurred in our school systems? We need to figure out a better way than the punitive measurements that we're currently using in our educational system. So we're looking to go into and partner with the school system to really push the restorative justice agenda and practices within the school system, and address the school to prison pipeline. We work with our state and local agencies in the criminal justice field, juvenile justice, to see how can restorative justice practices work within their system. We know the best practices around restorative justice and practice. We're looking to do research around, restorative justice and practices, not only in the state of Maryland, but nationally. So we are the first university, not HBCU, but first university, period, in the state to open a restorative justice practice institute that specifically is looking for research and training and being intentional about addressing the harm that our communities have endured. And we have to break the cycle of that harm, because we know hurt people hurt people. And we know that policing, we know that criminal justice system, the educational system, is flawed with punitive measurements that's designed not to help the individual, but simply to either incarcerate or throw them away. And so as HBCU, and more importantly, as an Institute of Higher Education, we are taking the lead and saying we can do better. And that's what we're doing at Bowie State University. So thank you for allowing me to follow up, Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. We certainly look forward to hearing more about this institute and seeing what else you guys do. Just to go back to our student panelists quickly as we wrap up here, Dr. Wright had previously mentioned the specific resources that we can instill at both universities on campus to really help build those relationships and bridge the unity. To our student leaders on the call, what resources in particular would you guys like to see? And Zara or Courtney, you can feel free to start.
I can start, as Dr. Adams kind of just finished where Bowie State has headed to address these issues. I believe that we're addressing the overall social justice concerns, but we're also approaching it in a way that we address kind of what my previous question answered, the mental of the students, because I know that we had during the conference, for example, we had a whole day of events where we discussed certain topics in social justice, just concerns overall. And then we had a moment where all of the faculty, all of the researchers, all of the students sat, we meditated, and we we got back to our peace of mind and we came back and grounded ourselves. And as I stated before, I believe that is essential to refuel the work within the person. It is difficult to continue that fight without grounding yourselves on the passions that you have. And I think that it is essential for, as Dr. Adams is one of my professors, he always notes that taking care of your mental. And I think that it is essential for professors to also see themselves within us and see us within them. We want to be and aspire to be where they are, but we are taking steps and we have different strives to jump over. But I definitely think that the support of mental is the most important for me, just to make sure that students never lose their fuel of passion, but never never lose their fuel for their passion, basically. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that call to all of our faculty members and moving forward to see how we can help students and moving forward in this social justice movement. Zara, if there's anything you would like to share?
I think regarding like programs that I would want to see regarding relationships would definitely be having like some type of forum or a very informal forum regarding like students and professors and faculty between the two schools. I feel like, you know, Bowie State is so close and we're like in such close proximity, but I feel like there's like a huge disconnect between, you know, both of our communities and our campuses. So I feel like just getting together and just getting to know one another, not necessarily on an academic level, but just like from person to person. I do feel like going to like an HBCU and a PWI, there are two different environments. And I do feel like both of the schools have resources that the others lack. And I feel like through this Social Justice Alliance, we are able to fill those gaps between, you know, both of our institutions. So I feel like, you know, having some type of event forum just to get to know one another on a personal level would definitely be beneficial for both of them.
Thank you so much. And we certainly hope that after our symposium today, that conversations can continue to occur between universities, but most importantly, as all of our panelists have been able to allude to, that the action begins and continues at both universities and moving forward into our communities as well. I thank all of our panelists today for your thoughtful comments and insights today. This has really been a great conversation. I hope that everyone watching is inspired to answer the call for social justice. Continue to voice the change that needs to occur. Fill your space with ideas and collaboration for change. Students, this is your time to become involved. Instructors and community members, continue guiding the generation towards reaching the change that we know needs to occur. As our panelists today have alluded to, it is possible, and together we need to uplift one another. We are all needed in this work. As you know, the Social Justice Alliance was established between Bowie State and the University of Maryland in a time of loss, pain, and grief. And the work that the Alliance continues to do is focused on unity, healing, and creating that needed change. You'll hear next about two efforts to create unity and healing that we hope will further motivate you to consider the changes you need to make in your communities. I thank all of our panelists again, and thank you to all of our audience members joining us today.
Our family, during this tragic time, received thousands of cards and letters and remarks of condolences. Now I'd like to take the time to read several of these cards. They really brought joy to our family to know that so many people actually cared. The first card says, "Dear family, friends, loved ones, and members of the community, I am so terribly sorry about the loss of such an incredible man with such a bright and promising future. Words fall empty when writing about such a fabulous young man. His memory will be always a blessing and may be forever remembered. How much joy he brought. Sending my love, thoughts, during this extremely difficult time. with heartfelt love. So sorry for your loss. It wasn't right, and it never will be right. But know that we are good people, and people who will stand beside you during this very difficult time. His life will never be forgotten. It wasn't right for him to be taken away so soon. And I am so sorry, and I will pray for your family. Dear Collins family, we grieve with you and honor the memory of your beloved son. May God be with you always, and may he give you the strength that you need to endure. And in my final reading, I'd like to share this card with you as well. Your son, brother, and friend was a hard-working young man that no doubt helped and inspired lots of people. I personally know saying sorry for your loss wouldn't be enough to make up for his absence. So I will say thank you for blessing the world with such a wonderful young man. Peace and blessings. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Derek Hinton, a senior biology major at Bowie State University and a member of the Bowie State University, University of Maryland Social Justice Alliance. On behalf of the Alliance, I'd like to thank you all for attending. Forward with Hope, never shall we forget. We hope you enjoy the program and will continue to engage with the work of the BSU UMD Social Justice Alliance. Please be sure to check out the Alliance's website at go.umd.edu/SJA for more information and upcoming events. Thank you to our moderator, Taylor Palmer, and our panelists, Dr. Charles Adams, Taffany English, Doron F. Ezekson, Dr. Rayshawn Ray, Zara Sadiq, and Courtney Wells. Thank you to our university presidents, Dr. Amit Sabro and Dr. Daryl Pons, and their offices. Thank you to the BSU UMD Social Justice Alliance led by Dr. Georgina Dodge and Dr. Kametta Hairston. To those who helped create this program, Dr. Aaliyah Brown, Dr. Sean Coleman, Allison J. Dickinson, Jane Hirschberg, Nancy Martin, Dr. Carol Moyer, Dr. Kim Nickerson, Dr. Kedrick Peters, Cassandra Robinson, Dr. Mia Smith Bynum, Steve Stevens II, Tamia Webster, and Annette Wedderburn. Thank you to the University Relations and Marketing team at Bowie State University and the Strategic Communications and Special Events teams at the University of Maryland. We also like to thank the event production teams at VPC and Event EQ for helping us prepare the program. And a very special thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Rick and Don Collins and the Second Lieutenant Richard W. Collins III Foundation for your vision. Your efforts serve as a guiding light and a beacon for the Social Justice Alliance as we move forward with hope. Thank you all again for coming today. Be well and take care.